You're listening to a fight against free kill laws from AMP Media Production Studio.
Welcome to the Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we give a voice to those who have suffered firsthand from medical malpractice. In Florida, families devastated by medical negligence are left without justice because of a law many don't even know exists. Florida's free kill law prevents families from holding doctors accountable. These are real stories with real loss and no justice. Contact Ed at 561-239-2417 or visit afreekill.com. Today we uncover the truth, share real stories, and demand change.
Good evening, and thank you again for joining us for our podcast, The Fight Against Free Kill Laws. This evening, we've got a tremendous guest. She's been on the show a few times, Cindy Jenkins. She was one of the pioneers in this whole movement to organized advocacy to abolish these laws. She has some insights that I think are very worth listening to. And without further ado, let's bring in Cindy, please. Hello, Cindy.
Hi, Ed. It's nice to see you.
Thank you so very much for taking the time to join us. Thank you for taking your time.
Yes, of course.
If you could give us your, we were talking before, but give us your perspective on what happened this year.
Yeah, so I'll give you a perspective real quick. I lost my daughter Taylor to confirmed reckless medical negligence and neglect 2.5 months after her 25th birthday. She was rear-ended at a red light in Orlando, rushed to the closest level 2 trauma center, where she was misdiagnosed with a brain injury. The on-call neurosurgeon was required to arrive on premises per Department of Health guidelines within 30 minutes of receiving that consult. He showed up 7 hours later, which is a huge violation, and it puts the public in immediate jeopardy. In the meantime, what my daughter really had was internal bleeding. She had sustained a torn artery from the seatbelt in her pelvic area. And despite the fact that the neurosurgeon did not show up, the signs of internal bleeding that were glaringly obvious were present. She had even been identified as a bleeding risk right after arrival. But this neurosurgeon, or the trauma surgeon, when the nurses notified him of the things he said to notify him of, the first time they notified him, he said, we'll see her on rounds. They showed up an hour later. The nurses then notified that her BP was 70/40, her heart rate was 150, her abdomen was distended and hard. These are all glaring medical school 101 signs of internal bleeding, and he just ordered IV fluids. So essentially, even though all the signs of internal bleeding were there, actually at the scene of the accident, they were recorded by EMS, they were handed over to the hospital when she got there. They did nothing, and it was over 15 hours before they stopped the bleeding, and of course, nobody can survive that. Paid for a private autopsy that proved that there was no brain injury. The medical examiner was forced to change her cause of death to the bleeding because the cause sent by the hospital was non-existent. The brain injury did not exist. That's when I learned of Florida's free kill law. That's when I paid an attorney to get her records for me, because these hospitals will ignore you if you don't have one. It's just you against them and you don't have legal recourse, good luck. And I also paid for a sworn affidavit letter of merit that outlines the recklessness that killed her. Of course, we don't have any recourse. We cannot access the judicial system to hold the doctors and hospitals accountable. In spite of the fact,
it was a slam dunk that she died of medical error.
Oh,
no
slam
question.
dunk. It's an absolute slam dunk. The medical examiner confirmed it. The autopsy confirmed it. It would be what's considered gross negligence manslaughter, because from the time the surgeon was told by the radiologist, your patient is bleeding internally, he waited 7 more hours to have her taken for surgery. So she laid there and bled to death. When he administered mass transfusion protocol, he did it in the inappropriate blood products. It's usually a 1-1-1 ratio, which would be red blood cells, plasma, platelets. that actually turned her blood into, it was like water flowing through a bucket at that point. Any coagulation that had happened at the site of the tear would have been flushed out by these red blood cells that are like pure water instead of more like a
Right.
more
There was
thick
no
water.
coagulating agents or anything.
No coagulating. So she had critical platelets. Even after critical platelets were identified because of what he was doing, she just continued to lay there for over 3 more hours, getting the wrong transfusion protocol, getting the wrong ratio of products. And he killed her. When I say he killed her, I'm not kidding. When you are a surgeon and you know your patient is bleeding, and then you administer a mass transfusion protocol in a way that's going to accelerate death, and then you continue to wait 7 hours to take a patient to surgery, that would be no different than if somebody ran out in front of or rode their bike in front of my vehicle and I hit them, and then I got out of my car and I watched them laying there bleeding to death for 7 hours before I called 911. Right? Like that really is kind of the equivalent of that. It's gross negligence manslaughter. There's been no
you wanted some
accountability.
accountability, right?
No accountability.
And in your efforts to get some accountability, what happened?
So I learned of Florida's free kill law and started fighting it. And then I made sure I submitted complaints to the Agency for Healthcare Administration that oversees hospitals and the Department of Health that oversees doctors. Excuse me. Submitted complaints to both. Every I was dotted, every T was crossed. The gross negligence is glaringly obviously in these complaints, glaringly obvious, and they closed them. Said there was no probable cause to believe that medical negligence occurred. So now we are learning that the Department of Health does not have the funding or the capacity to actually investigate every complaint received. They are inundated with complaints due to the rampant malpractice in Florida, and they close about 97% of complaints received.
Without investigation.
Essentially, unless you've gone through the court system, in most cases, unless you've gone through the court system and they've been able to pay for the record reviews that are required by whatever specialist was involved, and you present that to them, they're closing complaints. They don't have the funds. If I had ordered a record read for a neurosurgeon, a trauma surgeon, an emergency room physician, and the nurses involved, it would have been well over 70 to 100,000 plus just to get the sworn affidavits stating that medical negligence resulted in death. I've had multiple physicians look at the record. I have a sworn affidavit from an ER physician because the negligence was so gross, so reckless that he was able to just pinpoint all of it. It wasn't like it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that if you diagnose a patient with a brain injury and the neurosurgeon doesn't come in for 7 hours, that's a recipe for disaster. It also doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that a patient's going to bleed to death if you administer MTP wrong and then leave them laying there for 7 hours.
Right.
So no accountability whatsoever. And I've joined this fight to have the law repealed. And
you talked a little bit about the number of cases. You know, some of our other guests on our other podcasts, Teal, Mr. Creighton, they've all shown the number of times that people have approached, or the number of times people have sought legal representation. One of the law groups in the Tampa area said they get 5 or 6 requests a week. Oh, yeah. So it's rampant.
And that's just for free kill. That's just for patients that happen to fall into this category. Then there's what you experienced, where any hospital with sovereign immunity caps, nobody can help you. No attorney can help you gather the medical records, do your due process. They look at the fact that they are automatically capped on what can be recovered, and they realize, I would be upside down if I tried to help you. So these laws are by design. They're not loopholes. They were very intentionally designed for one reason and one reason only, and that is to protect hospital and insurance company profits. I think what a lot of people don't realize is whether you fall into this category or not, right? Because people are like, oh, well, I'm married or I have kids or whatever. It doesn't matter if you fall into the category. If there's no accountability for fatal medical negligence, there's no record of it. So you may think you're doing your due diligence and your research before you go see a physician, and you're never going to know how many free passes they've gotten for killing patients. The two doctors responsible for my daughter's death, you'll never know that that happened. One of them has 5 different past medical malpractice claims against him. So he does have malpractice that you can determine by going through the insurance regulation website, not the Department of Health website. But essentially, it's a cover up. We're not able to tell the true record of a doctor. And in your case, your son's death didn't count. My daughter's death didn't count. Anyone researching those hospitals or those doctors may think that they've done their due diligence and they're making a wise decision, and they have no way of knowing what the doctors have done in the past.
Let's drill down on that a little bit. When in 2009, when my son passed, at that time, because he did have a daughter that was his bloodline, so he could pursue wrongful death. But at that time, the cap was $100,000 per claimant. And his other daughter was actually his stepdaughter. So in the eyes of the law, even though he was the only father she had ever known, she had no right to any damages recovery. So with $100,000, the lawyers that we spoke with, they said it's going to take you $200,000 to bring it to court.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now fast forward to where we are now, and there's a huge body, and the body is growing very, very rapidly. The body of people who are becoming advocates for the abolishment of this law. I think we're going to have a chance to have you talk a little bit more about that too. But now, what the even again for the second year in a row, with an overwhelming majority in both the House and the Senate. The bill moved to be heard by committees, and it was never brought forward. The compromise that was offered was to put caps on damages. If there were caps on damages, then they would not stand in the way of abolishing the law. But just as was in my son's case, even if it was a $500,000 cap, what is the cost of bringing a case to court these days?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you mentioned this in a previous conversation that we had. When they know that there's a cap, they're going to, on the other side, we're funding their attorneys, by the way, because we're paying health insurance premiums and Medicare taxes and medical bills. So we kind of are getting a double whammy, we being the public, because when we're paying our health insurance premiums and those are funding our hospital visits and hospital bills, and then we're paying our copays, and we pay insurance premiums and doctors pay insurance premiums. Essentially, we're funding the fact that they have so much money to fight us when they are negligent. And in turn, when you have a victim who falls under one of these laws, like your son or my daughter, or even someone in a sovereign immunity hospital that survives the negligence, and then they're capped, it's very easy for the hospitals and insurance companies to use the money we're paying them to run the bill up so that it gets to the point where you either settle and take what they're willing to give you, or they just get you to settle and go away because you're going to end up in an upside down situation. It's all very intentional. I will say this for anyone watching: the lobbyists represent the bottom line of hospitals and insurance companies. That's why our premiums and our healthcare bills pay, these hospitals use those to pay lobbyists to protect their profits. Anything a lobbyist ever asks for is never in for the good of the people. Anything they ask for is for their bottom line, because they're paid lots of money to make sure they protect the bottom line of these hospitals and insurance companies in this case. Essentially, when we're in Tallahassee and we're giving our testimony about why the law needs to end and the real repercussions of the law, how it's making healthcare dangerous for everybody, how it's blocking accountability, how it's doing nothing other than protecting the profits of the wrongdoers, and that we're funding this through our health insurance premiums and our federal taxes. The lobbyists then stand up, the lobbyists for health insurance companies and hospitals, they stand up and they say, we need balance. And you've heard some politicians, if you're watching this closely, also mention that term balance. Governor DeSantis said it during the veto press conference. Senate President Albritton has said it in multiple news interviews that,
Their buzzword.
yes, they want to see the law go away, but they need balance. And so let me speak to what balance means. Balance means if you're going to take away this law, free kill, and let the fact that that's no longer there impact our profits, we need to balance that out. We need to balance our books by making sure this law is here that will protect them on an even larger scale. And for the record, back in 2018, 2019, if you look at the bills being filed back then and look at the committee hearings, which are on the Florida channel, in 2018, 2019, the lobbies were fighting to restore unconstitutional damage caps in Florida. And it is written in articles and it's on news reports. They didn't want free kill to end. They're like, oh, no, we cannot do that. The doctors would leave if we repeal free kill, and they would, medical malpractice premiums would go up. All of these
they've been proven to be false, right?
Yeah, false narratives that have been completely disproven. But they wanted their caps. So they wanted free kill and caps back then on every hospital, every victim. They weren't winning at that time. So they decided, well, now we can leverage free kill to get our caps. These families really want this law to go away. And that's exactly what we saw in 2025, Ed. Actually, starting in 2024, 2024 is the first year the Senate ever filed a bill to repeal the law. In 34 years, a bill to repeal free kill had never been filed. In 2024, it was Senator Yarborough that filed a bill. That bill was, we'll end free kill and we'll add damage caps on everybody. Mm-hmm. That's what that bill said. That bill actually passed the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then it died due to the massive news pressure on Senator Yarborough and the Senate, and the fact that the public was being educated on what was really happening. So that bill died. Then we fast forward to 2025. This is, again, the first time, or the second time in 35 years now that a bill has been filed to end free kill. And they essentially used our grief, our fight, our bills to have us show up in Tallahassee and fight for the bill to pass Senate Judiciary, and then fight for it to pass Health and Human Services Committee, and then fight for it to pass the Senate Rules Committee. And it passed all three of those committees clean. There were no caps added to that bill. That bill made it all the way to the Senate floor, and then suddenly a caps amendment was filed. So it's very clear in hindsight that their playbook was, let's have these families push it through since there's so much exposure to this now, and then we'll file an 11th hour caps amendment. They were never counting on the fact that that caps amendment was not going to pass.
Well, and we should also remind the viewers that three times caps have been ruled unconstitutional by the Florida Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. So in spite of that, even the governor, they're trying to slip in the caps as a throwing a bone for a compromise.
Well, and it's just to balance their books and protect the profits on an even larger scale,
right?
Initially, they wanted free kill and caps. Now they're like, well, if we can use free kill to get caps, that'd be great. Because again, you're never going to hear a lobbyist stand up and ask for anything that is not beneficial to the profits of the companies they represent. They're simply there to protect profits. In my conversations with Senator Yarborough in 2024, he did take the time to speak with me extensively. One of the things I and other families brought up was Senator Yarborough, because he was talking about how there had to be a balance, there had to be a compromise. If you're going to trade off hitting the profits with removing this law and stopping the funding of fatal medical negligence, we got to put this law on the books to make sure it still continues, is what they mean. But he said, I said, here's the thing. This has been declared unconstitutional. Caps did not deliver what was promised. They were in effect in Florida for over a decade. Physicians never saw a decrease in premiums. Insurance companies benefited, hospitals benefited, but the people did not benefit, right? So what he said to me when I said, how's that going to work, considering they've been declared unconstitutional more than once? And he said, well, we feel confident that based on the makeup of the current Supreme Court in Florida, that if a bill goes through with caps on it, that the Supreme Court will declare them constitutional again. And
I hadn't heard that.
yeah, so that's why they've been fighting so hard. The current Florida Supreme Court, without doing any extensive empirical studies that were done when they were declared unconstitutional, would simply declare them constitutional for the fact that Ron DeSantis wants caps on everybody, right? Hospitals and insurance companies are some of his largest donors.
To avoid jackpot justice.
To avoid jackpot justice. Yeah, that's another diversion technique, because the only entities hitting the jackpot right now are the hospitals,
Right.
who don't have to repay health insurers and Medicare when they kill a patient. Normally, you don't get paid for killing a patient, right? You have to repay health insurance. It happens through subrogation. You have to get a medical negligence judgment and settlement, and then the funds that the hospital was paid, that goes to you through the settlement, and then it goes back to the health insurer or to
Right.
Medicare. And this
But
is
if it's
completely
never
blocking
litigated.
that from happening. So talk about jackpot, hitting the jackpot. Hospitals are hitting the jackpot. Insurance companies are hitting the jackpot because we are strategically blocked from seeking legal recourse, and everyone in America is funding this. It's not just Floridians.
And forget the monetary aspect of it. Just the fact that these physicians who have been so grossly negligent, somebody is shopping around for a doctor, they're shopping around for a surgeon. They're looking at his record, and it looks pristine. When in fact he may have the case up in the Panhandle with the wrong organ being taken out. I mean, it wasn't until he did it the second time that.
And that's the thing. So he was found less than a year earlier. He had removed a wrong body part from
Right.
a 70-year-old woman, and he settled a lawsuit for killing that woman by removing the wrong body part. You only know that by going to the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation website, because the Department of Health had his record as squeaky clean. So
Right.
had that family reached out to the Department of Health, because they were actually telling that doctor, we were from Alabama, we would rather go home and see our physicians and have this procedure done there. And the doctor convinced him that he'd have to sign a hold harmless, because if he left, it could result in death. So they kind of scared them into staying and having the
Yeah, they
surgery.
maneuvered him.
And even if they'd taken the time from the time he said, no, you need to stay, if they'd taken the time to reach out to the Department of Health, there was no record that doctor had removed a wrong body part a year prior. I feel safe to say if they had looked that up, and by the way, his wife is a nurse, so she knows more than like the standard individual, but had she taken the time to research it, and they may have, we don't know, they would have been told, no, his record's completely clean. That's not true. You have to know to dig and see if there was ever a medical negligence payout through the insurance regulation website. But I feel safe to say that anybody who was told what he told them, who could have seen on the Department of Health website that he'd done a wrong body part removal the year prior, they probably would have said, we hear what you're saying, we'll sign the hold harmless, we're going to go see a different doctor. And to make matters even worse, when he removed the liver instead of the spleen, he continued to be the head of surgery for 2 hospitals in the Panhandle and operate with a clear active license for over a month. When the story hit the national news and all eyes were on Florida and everyone was like, how do you remove a liver instead of a spleen? That was when the Department of Health took immediate action. Once it was national news, they suspended his license, right? So
There's proof. It's not just a Florida problem. He was a resident of Alabama.
Yeah, you can be visiting from elsewhere, and he doesn't fall into the category, Ed. But the thing is,
Right.
I
He
can
didn't fit the
promise you,
profile,
there's
but
no
he still
amount
is
of
a
money.
victim.
His wife wants him back. There's no amount of money that they can compensate her with that if she could then say, here, you can take all this money back, and if you'll give me my husband, I know she wants her husband back. And this is why it's so dangerous for people that don't even fall into the category. I have a lot of people reach out to me that say, they did this to my family member or that to my family member, and I do have access to the courts, but they hurt my loved one. Like, how does this even happen? And people are tired of the reckless negligence. And when you have over 30 years of the same lobbying firms, the same lobbyists fighting relentlessly, politicians come and go, but these same lobbyists have been around for 35 years now, going on 35 years, fighting for layers and layers and layers of laws to protect the profits of hospitals and insurance companies. You end up with the train wreck of a healthcare system we have in Florida, where you don't even know how to determine if a doctor has had a past record. You can't really determine that. And you're seeing the type of negligence where Florida's in the spotlight now because we have doctors in our state that can't tell a liver from a spleen. And perhaps when we are in Tallahassee and the lobbyists are standing up at the podium saying, oh, if you repeal the law, no doctors will want to come to Florida and practice. Maybe this
Nobody's leaving.
law and all the like it are the reasons we're getting doctors in Florida that can't tell a liver from a spleen. Like, this is a disaster you get when there's no accountability.
Well, to talk a little bit about the new developments, and I know we have some new advocacy groups.
Yes.
You have started one. I heard about a doctor that's got a podcast on X. That
I was just on her podcast recently.
Were you?
Yes, I'm lining families up with her. Yes,
we would love to learn more about her.
Absolutely. Her name's Dr. Margaret. She does the Dr. Margaret Show, and she's a very well credentialed physician. She's having free kill families on. She somehow saw my post on X about fighting to end the law for Taylor and reached out and said, I want to have you on my show. She's currently interviewing Yana and Ethan to have them on the show to explain what happened to their dad. And she'll just continue to air the stories, because here she is, a well-credentialed doctor who has lots of other doctors join the podcast, and not a single doctor that heard about this law agreed with it. Mm-hmm. So, excuse me, there are lots of efforts to end the law. You know, we're up against Ballard Partners, Florida Justice Reform Institute, Florida Chamber of Commerce, Florida Hospital Association, Florida Medical Association. When you look at a bill that's filed to end a law that would restore accountability but hurt their profits, there's pages of opponents, of lobbyists that are going to fight so that it doesn't pass. And then there's our side of things. And what people really need to understand is this is going to take everyone using their voice, right? This is not just about the families who have lost a loved one to free kill or to damage caps and had no accountability. This is impacting everyone in America, and it's going to take everyone in America using their voice. So we have your podcast. We have End Free Kill Now that Daryl Parrott started after his son was killed in St. Augustine.
His billboard campaign is still going strong?
Yeah, it's still going strong. And we have Florida Medical Rights Association. I just launched Healthcare Accountability Initiative. And
could we bring
our
that
list
back
of
up, please?
Organizations are growing. Excuse me.
No, let's bring that back up. There we go. Yeah, our viewers, we are growing in numbers. Our numbers are growing very, very rapidly, and that's something that politicians understand. They understand money and they understand numbers. Okay, and we are developing the numbers. I encourage everyone who views this podcast, please look in. Look at this new advocacy group that Cindy has started here. Final thoughts.
It's going to take everybody, to your point that you just made, when you have a legislature that 93% in 2025 still voted to end the law after the Capps Amendment failed. 93% of the Florida legislature, with overwhelming bipartisan support, voted to end the law. It reaches the governor, and he has a press conference at a hospital with some of the lobbyists I've mentioned present, and he vetoes the bill.
And why didn't the Senate move to overturn the veto?
Exactly. The support was there for a veto override. So we have these tier one legislators who are the bill gatekeepers, the chairs of each Senate committee, the Senate president, we have the governor, and it couldn't be any more blatantly obvious that when a bill passes with 93% overwhelming bipartisan support and it gets vetoed by the governor at a hospital with lobbyists present after refusing to meet with families, and then the next year, the House still tries and they file a bill and it passes the House unanimously again. And then the Senate files a bill and 8 co-sponsors in the Senate. There's only 40 senators and 8 co-sponsors smack their name on that bill as co-sponsors. They want to defend that bill. And then the bill's not even allowed to be heard. This tells you the functionality of the Florida legislature is quite questionable. And it makes you wonder who they're really representing, who the key legislators who are the bill gatekeepers are really representing.
Exactly. All right, Cindy, we're going to have to leave it there. I encourage all of our viewers, look at these other websites, look at everything that we are doing to unite and develop a formidable body of individuals who want this law abolished. I want to thank Cindy so very, very much for your time. I know how precious your time is, and we will see you again on our next broadcast. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for watching The Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we interview those who have dealt firsthand with medical malpractice. Families are devastated by medical malpractice and left with no justice. This isn't just a loophole. It's a failure to protect the ones we love. It's time to change the law. It's time for accountability. Contact your state legislatures, visit afreekill.com for more information on how to help, or contact Ed at 561-239-2417. Because every life should matter.
You're listening to A Fight Against Free Kill Laws from AMP Media Production Studio.